Today's topic, the William Green settlement.
This happened Monday night. Police have not said exactly what time. Police Chief Hank Stawinski says it appeared William Green was involved in multiple collisions as he drove through the intersection of St. Barnabas Road
Okay, good.
and Winston Street. Police say Corporal Michael Owen
Good.
and another officer were called to an address in the 5000 block of Winston Street. According to charging documents, a witness told the two officers that Green was asleep in his car. Police say Owen and the other officer saw Green asleep. A spokesperson initially said the officers thought Green's car smelled of PCP. Chief Stawinski later retracted that claim to clarify that Green was not on PCP. Police say Corporal Owen handcuffed Green behind his back and put him in the front seat of his police cruiser. Police say the other officer heard gunshots about 5 to 10 minutes later and were told that officer went back to the cruiser and found Green still handcuffed in the car with gunshot wounds.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gina Ford. I'm the Communications Director for Prince George's County Executive Angela Brooks. For the last few months, the county has been involved with mediation with the Green family, Mr. Billy Murphy and associates of Murphy, Falcon, and Murphy. It's regarding the shooting death of Mr. Green by a Prince George's County police officer, and today the county executive is prepared to announce the settlement agreement. First, we'll hear from County Executive Brooks, followed by Judge Stephen Platt, who served as mediator, Mr. Billy Murphy of Murphy, Falcon, and Murphy, followed by Shelley Green, daughter of William Green.
Police are given by this community an awesome and tremendously difficult responsibility of protecting life. They are also likewise given an authority that is not shared by any other in this community, and that is the authority to take life. That authority is given to the police by this community. It is a trusting relationship shared by the community and police. And when that trust is abused, it is necessary to take swift and decisive action. And so I'm joined this morning. I want to thank Mrs. Green, who's here, Miss Brenda Green, who is the mother of William Green. I am also joined by Shelley Green, who is the daughter of William Green. And William Little is here, the son of William as well. And I want to thank them for joining us. I also want to thank Billy Murphy and Malcolm Ruff of the Murphy Falcon Murphy Law Firm, who are present today. On the evening of January 27th, 2020, I received a phone call that I will never forget. The phone call came and said that one of our police officers had shot and killed a gentleman who was seated in the front seat of a police cruiser, that he was handcuffed, that his hands were behind his back, that he was unarmed.
One is civil. It determines what level of compensation people should get for their tremendous losses. And the other component is criminal. And in that situation, the determination is, did the person commit a crime? And if so, should he go to jail? And if so, for how long? We have finished phase one, the civil justice phase. And now the family is awaiting the resolution of the criminal justice phase. And all along, all this family ever wanted was fairness. They didn't want revenge. They didn't proceed in anger, even though they were. They didn't proceed on the basis of purely an emotional response because they knew that that would not get us to where we are today. They were rational, fair-minded, sane, and reasonable. Now, from County Executive Brooks' point of view, I've known her for 8 years. I have watched her with admiration and respect. She is a gifted political leader. She is brilliant in the way that she understands and implements policy and in the way she treats other people. She's one of a kind. But she was saddled when she first came into public office as a prosecutor with a corrupt, racist, brutal police department that had a long history of it. On 2 occasions, they were under federal jurisdiction. And recently, they have come under scrutiny because of the racist practices that they have towards black officers. When she was a prosecutor, she couldn't deal with it like she can deal with it now. But now, she has an opportunity to reform the department. And we, both the family and Mr. Ruff and I, are anxious to participate in real police reform. Police reform of the kind that I haven't seen in my lifetime, and I've been practicing for 50 years. Police reform that will stop this from ever happening again. Police reform that will implement body cameras and punish officers if they don't turn them on when they're supposed to, or if they turn them off when they're not supposed to. Police reform that understands that across the world, 8% of the population is not fit to be a law enforcement officer, not temperamentally suited. But amazingly, 40% of the people who apply to be police officers are not fit. And so meaningful police reform screens them out with psychological testing so that they don't become police officers. We need that as well. There are a lot of other components to police reform that we will be working on with Ms. Alston-Brooks. But we wouldn't be here today without cell phone video cameras. And we won't be here as a continuous process unless body cameras are uniformly implemented across the country. So
you're muted.
In this case, the takeaway is that the black life of Mr. Green truly matter. And the black lives of his mother and 2 children truly matter, because black lives matter. Black lives matter.
Judge William Billy Murphy Jr. As the firm's founder and senior partner, Judge William H. Billy Murphy Jr. stands on a respected legacy of legal counsel. He has been a Baltimore trial attorney for decades, aggressively and effectively handling a broad range of ongoing cases. With a 90% success rate in state court cases, Judge Murphy knows how to navigate complex legal matters. He also holds a 40% success rate in federal cases, which is 4 times higher than the national average, 9%. His 40-plus years of practice in and out of the courtroom have equipped Judge Murphy to advocate for clients from all backgrounds and walks of life. Boasting a reputation as an expert litigator with a calm, calculated approach, Judge Murphy prides himself on getting to the truth. When he asks those who know him well to describe the man who leads a majority of Falcon and Murphy's toughest cases, you'll hear the words imaginative, leader, calm, and team builder. When you need a composed, precise, and effective litigation lawyer in your corner, turn to Judge Murphy.
Good morning, Justice B family and our family watching on Real STL News. Good morning, Judge Murphy. How are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. So we had a bit of an introduction. We played a video with some background information on the Green case, and then some snippets from the full press conference that aired on September 28th. Now, we have 2 segments to this. In the first segment, I want to really have you talk with us about a couple of things. One, it is apparent from the phone call that Alsbrook received on January 27th that the blue wall of silence began to speak and brought this whole case to fruition. Also want to kind of look at the qualified immunity and impunity that a lot of folks who are activists have always complained about. and then the decision for settlement versus a trial. So can you give me some of your insights and perspectives about this, because this is very historic and unprecedented in that you actually had an officer call and report this shooting, and then bring us forward to how things unravel from that point.
Well, it is an unusual case in the sense that it was just over the top outrageous. And when the police officer who had handcuffed my client behind his back, put him in the car, said that the reason he shot him was he tried to get his gun. That's when everything went south for the officer, because that was impossible.
Mhm.
And it was probably the worst one I've seen, although I had one that qualifies, and that was when an officer ran a client of mine head first into the back of the holding cell and paralyzed him from the neck down for life. I got a $44 million verdict in that case. And so I've seen worse cases, but it's hard to top this one.
Right. So what it's rare that officers tell on each other. This had to have really been very unsettling for this officer, for him to make that decision to call and report this shooting.
Well, yes, but the in the era of body cameras, this is something that I think the chief felt compelled to disclose, because covering it up would have just been too difficult.
Right.
You had people in the street body camera in this, and what were you gonna do to suppress those body cameras? What were you gonna do to keep them from becoming public? So let's turn it around for a second. What amazes me is how flagrant these police officers still act, knowing that they're going to be on video. And that shows you the strength of the culture that gets them this worked up in the first place. You know, we still have what's called the uppity Negro syndrome. And so when you talk back as a black man to a police officer, whether you do so respectfully or disrespectfully, you are supposed to get beat up. You're supposed to get hit. You're supposed to be assaulted. You're supposed to be charged. That's just the way it's been for the last 400 years. And so many of these officers came into policing with the attitude that that was right. You know, that's called showing us respect. No, it's not. It's showing you civility. And it's being punished when you're not servile. You know, you're not supposed to, if you're black, you're not supposed to be able to curse a cop. Well, curse a cop's been constitutional for the last 60 years. That's something that police officers know that they should expect as part of the job. They're not supposed to be unprofessional when somebody cusses at them. But you have a nation of 40% racist people, who agree that these people ought to be whipped when they run their mouth. You know, so you could, searching for an explanation leads me to that one, because otherwise, you know, people are just stupid. And I don't think these officers are any more stupid than the general population. I just think they're habituated. This is the culture.
This is the culture. And because later in the show, I wanted to touch on the aspect of being fit to serve. And because you mentioned that, and that goes to, you know, the need for evaluation, more frequent evaluations and assessments. But I want to kind of stay with this train of thought around the whole onset of this and what happened after it got brought to light. How did you make the decision not to take this to trial?
Well, it was an easy decision from, I think, the county's perspective.
Okay.
Because what were they going to say? What was the defense going to be? And, you know, this is how you work stuff out in court. Prosecutors are in that kind of situation all the time where they have an overwhelming case. And what's the defendant going to do except do the best he can under the circumstances? And usually that's some kind of plea agreement where the person admits guilt and submits to a sentence that would be a little bit less than what he'd gotten if he'd gone to trial.
Mm-hmm.
Or a whole lot less sometimes. I mean, look, both sides have risks when they have to consider whether to go to trial or not. I've seen great cases fall apart at trial. I specialized in doing that to prosecutors.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they come in thinking they were strong, but they wouldn't understand the perspective that they were getting ready to be hit with at trial.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens. And so there's some risk, even when you have what you believe is an airtight case. Now, in this case, they were afraid of us because we have a 50-year reputation of kicking people's butts.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to roll those dice unless you have to. And so both sides did a little give and take, but we still ended up with the second highest settlement in the history of police brutality cases.
Mm-hmm.
We think we're tied for first, but somebody's allegedly found a case where it was slightly more given than the death case.
Okay. And was the family on board with the settlement and not carrying it to trial initially?
Well, the settlement speaks to that. I mean, it says yes, at that number they were on board.
Mm-hmm.
And how much is enough in these cases? You can
Right.
argue that with a number this high that it was too high. You could argue that it was still too low.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're in the realm of the subjective pain and suffering that the family felt. And this was an entirely beautiful family.
Mm-hmm.
The man who got killed, Mr. Green, was the linchpin of the family. He was the glue that held it all together. He was the one who always called everybody. He was the one who had time to maintain and cultivate the familial bonds. He was the one you could always depend on. He was the one who had the temperament that made him so lovable. They called him Boo Boo.
Mm-hmm.
And when we first engaged this family, 27 people showed up to the office. I've never had that happen.
Yeah.
I've never had that happen. I think my previous high was 10. But this family was so close that they travel and they behave as a large group all the time. And he was the hub. He was the hub.
So yeah, and you cannot put any type of dollar amount on the loss of life. And I understood you to say that the decision also hinged on, in terms of not doing the settlement versus the trial, was the dollar numbers, if I remember correctly, could have been astronomical for the county.
Well, yes. I mean, just think about it. This is a heinous crime that when all of the facts come out and all of the officers' testimony was done, you could expect a catastrophic verdict.
Okay. All right. So give me your perspectives on qualified immunity.
It's a judge-made doctrine that limits the liability of the police because some people think that the police shouldn't be sued. And this doctrine can make it happen. This doctrine is a judge-made effort to protect the police from being sued when they ought to be sued.
Okay.
Because if you didn't do anything wrong, why do you need immunity?
Right.
And so it anticipates that the police are going to do bad things, and it says, well, here we go. On the one hand, on the other hand, and it ends up blocking a good many meritorious cases, preventing people from getting compensation.
What are your thoughts or perspectives going forward in terms of other officers speaking out?
I've only seen it a handful of times in my 50-year career because think about it. The police have lots of reasons for why they don't want the other officers involved to tell the truth about what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so, look, we are a people who are constantly disrespected.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our feelings don't matter as much as white folks' feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Our families don't matter as much as white folks' families. Our looks inspire them to believe that we're totally different species of,
Mm-hmm.
of creature.
Right.
And that's embedded in the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are constantly in many walks of life marginalized, minimized, disregarded, disrespected, which is why I like that new series that's on television. It's kind of supernatural black series that covers the Tulsa massacre. It
Oh,
covers Emmett Till.
mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember the name of it. I'm in the middle of watching it, and it really brings all of that to life. And it reminds me of what it was like when I was growing up and how very little has changed in terms of the respect that we deserve that we don't get, and the crushing of the black dream of
Mm-hmm.
freedom, justice, and equality, the minimization of black careers, the low aim that our children have suffered as a result of all that we've been through and all that we are taught about ourselves that's negative.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, black crime, when it increases, always strengthens these feelings among whites that we are an inferior people.
Mm-hmm.
And so as things get worse for us, and as we act out more because of the conditions of our lives, our situation is viewed more and more negatively in terms of our humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a vicious spiral downward. And that's what we've seen happen in the black community. We're spiraling downward.
Right. Right. Did you receive any type of backlash for bringing this case? Were there people against you for bringing this case? Any organizations?
Well, I'm sure that, you know, the police weren't too tough about my bringing this case. They
Right.
never are, but that's never bothered me because I think I was destined to talk back to the police myself
Okay.
and to fight them at every turn when they were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's my destiny. I'm Taurus with Sagittarius moon, and that's how you are. You're idealistic. You fight hard as hell. Nobody can stop you in the pursuit of justice.
Yeah.
I don't give myself any credit for that temperament because I think I've been that way from birth. I just thank God for that.
Yeah. Just a side note, we're 3 days apart. I'm April 25th, and I think you're the 22nd.
Correct.
Okay, so I understand that clearly.
And Taurus to the bone.
Yes, sir. Okay, so yeah, I am really concerned about the police culture, as I know you are, and many others, and am idealistic about what is it that we can do to help impact that culture, and especially when we have some of our own folks a part of that culture, and they seem to sometimes become immersed in that culture in a way that you have to sometimes question now, what side are you on?
Well, it's a corrupting culture. And on the one hand, if you tell and you're black or white, you get ostracized and marginalized and ultimately fired if you're known as that kind of police officer. And this is true in almost every walk of life. It's true in corporate America. If you're the kind of person that would tell on somebody else's misadventures, you're regarded as a snitch or something lower. And so this culture has roots in human nature.
Right.
And when we look at police reform, we've got to make a decision. What are we looking for in terms of the type of police officer that we want? I mean, let's get granular.
Right.
And we want somebody who's kind. We want someone who is firm. We want someone who is interactive with the community. We
Mhm.
want someone who understands us. We want someone who is going to have a professionalism about him or herself so that things don't go sideways because people have been trained to show restraint.
Mhm.
But at the same time, look at the situation uh, uh, in policing today.
Mhm.
You see, if you haven't been getting that kind of cop, that righteous kind of person,
Mhm.
because you haven't been screening the others out,
Right.
then you have a whole lot of people who are spoiling it for that kind of human being. You have a
Mhm.
lot of people who are acting contrary on a daily basis to that kind of human being. And what the first phenomenon I observed was how brazenly police officers lie, and
Mhm.
how common it is for judges. In the beginning, white judges, and now, cross-racially, black and white judges,
Mhm.
to believe the police
Right.
routinely. That's their default position. This
Mhm.
cop is going to tell me the truth. Why would he lie? Well, you've never been black if you think that way. And if you've never been black or poor white, and you understand, then you don't understand why that phenomenon exists.
Mhm.
It exists because they can get away with it time after time after time.
Mhm.
If the default position is that the police officer is telling the truth, uh, then he's going to be believed to such an extent that all he has to do is make the lies sound pretty and plausible.
Mhm. Yeah.
And before uh, cell phone video cameras, that was the rule. Now,
Right.
does it
Mhm.
still go on? Unfortunately, it's such a strong reflex culturally. It's so embedded that
Mhm.
even with cell phone video cameras on you, or body cameras on you,
Mhm.
your default position is still reflects the culture of policing that existed for all these years
Mhm.
up to the present. So you see police officers doing stupid things on video,
Mhm.
and it gives police officers, it's hard to say whether it gives them a bad name or the name they should have.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know,
Right.
if one apple, you can't, you say, the old saying is one apple can spoil the barrel, but
Mhm.
it shouldn't be the typicality of the view of the group of apples. But if the bad apple been in there long enough, the barrel is spoiled too.
Right.
And
Exactly.
that's what we're seeing today. And
Today.
it's not a bad apple phenomenon.
Mhm.
It's a police culture phenomenon. So
Culture.
we got
I
to get
agree.
away from this excuse making, usually from white folks. Well, these are great. These are all great people. We see that's a reflection of the default position that police have not earned.
Right.
You can't go around saying they're all great people. I mean,
Mhm.
what group can you describe that way?
Right.
Especially a group that carries a gun
Mhm.
and gets believed all the time in how they use it, when they use it, where they use it, and why they use it.
Right.
So, you know,
Yeah. Okay. And on that note, we're going to take a commercial break. We'll be back in about 3 minutes. When we come back, I want Judge Murphy, I would like for you to spend some time um, sharing your insights and perspectives about being fit to serve. In watching the full press conference, you made some very striking remarks around the percentages who are fit to serve and who are not. And I want to kind of look at that because, again, that speaks to the culture and what's making up this police culture today. So, Justice B family, thank you so much for joining us in segment one. We're going to take a quick commercial break and we'll be back in 3 minutes. All right, welcome back, Justice B family. All right, we're going to begin segment two, and I want to make a note that at 10:45 we will start our Q&A session. So if you have any questions or comments you'd like to make, please make sure you begin posting them now, either via our show page on Facebook, or if you're viewing from Real STL News, you can post your questions there as well. All right, Judge Murphy. So let's give me your thoughts and perspectives about fit to serve. On the sides of the cars, they talk about to serve and protect, and we're seeing less than that. And a lot of chatter has been in the advocacy and policy communities around How do we get at this beast around these officers not being fit to serve? What needs to happen either at the agency and state level or even from the community level? How can we begin to make sure that we have folks in these positions that are fit to serve?
Well, first of all, there's got to be psychological testing. And our understanding of human psychology gets more sophisticated every year.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are test batteries that have been developed, which can do an excellent job of screening out most people who are not fit to be cops. Because look, it's common sense. Everybody's not fit to be a police officer.
Right.
Everybody's not temperamentally suited.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's not unbigoted. Everybody is not necessarily brave enough to do the job. Everybody is not positioned to avoid the abuse of power. Some people love to abuse power.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a cohort, a group of people out there who are identifiable by psychological testing that are not fit to be on the police force. Now, some studies estimate that that's about 8% of the population. Then when people are able to abuse power because of their attitudes towards their fellow man, whether they be racist attitudes, sexist attitudes, or just ordinary human attitudes of resentment and rage and anger and this, that, and the other, they clump in terms of the percentage becoming much higher of people who want to have a badge and a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes sense. I mean, some people want to have a badge and a gun because it goes with the job. Other people want a badge and a gun because it gives them a sense of being more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It gives them a way to be the boss. It gives them a way to look down on people and without people being able to do much about it. And, there are various attitudes which render a person unfit to be a cop, but many of these people clump in the application pool.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's about 40% of people who apply for police positions
Mm-hmm.
that are temperamentally unsuited, or physically unsuited, or whatever it is for the job. Now, in Baltimore, just to give an example of how it's been around the country,
Mm-hmm.
Nobody paid attention to that phenomenon. And there were reasons why. Number one, there's a shortage of people who want to be police officers.
Okay.
Especially in today's environment.
Mm-hmm.
And, in the Black community, there were a lot of people who didn't want to be police officers because they grew up disrespecting the way police treated them and others.
Right.
And so that's one thing. Pressure to hire. Number two, a lot of good people who would ordinarily be attracted to police work today are turned off by the liability issues. They said, man, some of these calls that these police officers have to make are close calls.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be sued if I make a mistake out there on patrol. That's
Mm-hmm.
understandable, but I'm sorry. Lawyers can be sued. Doctors can be sued.
Right.
Sucker, you're a professional just like the rest of us. And if you don't follow the rules and regulations as you have been trained to do, sure, you should be sued for that.
Right.
And the exclusionary rule is out there to really give a police officer an incentive not to behave illegally so that you can produce a case. And, that's always tempting.
Mm-hmm.
Police don't always have the desire to do it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'll do sneak and peek searches without warrants.
Right.
Break into your house, look around, try to leave everything the way they found it, then go get a warrant based on some phony informant's information and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or they will lock you up because they believe you're the guy, even though they don't have enough evidence to make the case.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've tried the system itself, which I despise on many levels, but not because of its intent. Its intent was to be a beautiful, well thought out system where the prosecutor goes after the bad guy with vigor after he's made a good faith determination that he's a bad guy based on evidence. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that falls down all the time. And where the defense is supposed to fight like hell, using the philosophy that your client is the son of God and everybody else is the son of a bitch. It's always been my philosophy.
Mhm.
And so that clash is supposed to produce truth. Two people fighting on warring sides with a judge in the middle and the jury able to hear the best arguments both sides can make.
Mhm. Okay.
Well, that system's a failure
Right.
because 95% of the people in the criminal justice system are poor and require public defender services.
Right.
So you can see that the mess is coming together every day.
Mhm.
And it's dismotivated people on both sides,
Mhm.
lack of training on both sides.
Yeah.
And it's a three-headed stool where nobody's getting the proper training, both first of all, on what attitude they ought to have.
Yeah.
And it's a shame you got to train attitude because you should come into the job with the right attitude, right?
Mhm. Exactly.
But
Right.
you got to train the attitudes of people. And
Yeah.
you know, when it's an all-white police force and an all-black or segmented community where the entire community is black, you don't see positive results from what we've been doing. And so reform is obviously necessary on
Right.
so many different levels. I mean, look, we still trick people during interrogations by lying to them. It's permissible
Exactly.
for the police to lie to you,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
because it works sometimes. But what's that say about how
What-
people view the police as a whole?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
you can stop and frisk under very liberal standards now. You know, you don't need probable cause anymore. That's been
Mhm.
true since the 60s. Well, it's actually always been the fact of the matter. The police can always make up the probable cause, and so they
Right.
stop you for nothing, and they got the protection because of their complexion and
Right.
because of their status.
Mhm.
So it's a big mess. And look, here's what we're facing in Baltimore. The more honestly critical we have been of the police, honestly critical of the mass arrests without probable cause, mass arrests, not episodic arrests,
Mhm.
intentional, you know, street sweeping operations.
Mhm.
We when we uncover this stuff and we're righteously indignant, the police response isn't, "Oh, we're sorry." This police response is basically "F you."
Mhm.
We ain't gonna do our job. And
Mhm.
so our murder rate is our unsolved murder rate is sky high. And then when police enrage the community, then the community doesn't want to cooperate by giving them the information about what really happened.
Right.
You know, F you. And it all started when we motorized the police, when we went to radio equipped
Mhm.
squad cars
Mhm.
from walking the beat. Now,
Walking the beat.
you know, we need motorized police cars, but that's all we have now. We don't have cops that walk the beat. We don't have community policing. We don't have
Right.
police who've seen the family, know the family, and know that Junior's the only bad person in the family.
Mhm.
You know, the police don't know the community they're policing because they race from one emergency situation to another in these isolated units with radio contact only. And so they begin to get a different view of the community that they're policing. You know, it's
Mhm.
a much more narrow, stereotypical view. And when they see the hostility that exists because there's no real um, empathetic interaction between the police and the community, it gets bad real fast.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, we did a show on last Saturday, and that came up when we talked about the fact that many officers do not know their communities. They don't know the people and the families in those communities, and they need to do more foot beats so that folks can become familiar and engaged and interact with the folks in those communities. And that would probably even reduce the criminalization of behavior that's not understood as being a part or a tenet of that particular community. The gathering around outside, talking to folks, talking to your neighbors, sitting on your porch, everything should not be criminalized.
Mhm.
So we've got about a minute or 2 minutes. We need to move into our Q&A, but I wanted to make sure you leave our audience with some thoughts around reform, because major reforms are coming out of this William Green settlement in terms of, I think you all formed a community or reform committee in which the community would be able to be engaged and involved in. Give me your thoughts on some of the top reforms that need to be addressed behind the William Green.
Well, we need to tape everything the police do routinely, because that would prevent them from lying about what they do. And when they can't lie about what they do, they have to do what they're supposed to do. And this is going to be a tough transition for most police forces, because the temptation is not to turn the camera on when you're supposed to, and you get away with it. There's one police officer did it 27 times in California and got rehired just recently after being suspended from the force for a year. That's crazy. He deliberately turned his camera off when he was supposed to put it on, and you know, misused the camera. So you got to have teeth in that part of it, so that the police officer isn't thinking about turning his camera off.
Okay.
Then the community is also involved in being taped, because that will have a salutary effect on behavior. When people know if you behave like an asshole, you're going to be shown in court to have been one. Or if you were brutal towards the police officer, it's going to come out in court. Or if you pulled the gun first, it's going to come out in court. So the number one thing we need to do is police the police by using the technology that's available to us. That's rule one. If you can't get that one right, you're just going to have a dysfunctional, broken police department that's going to evade its training deliberately.
Okay, that's
thing.
Excellent. Okay.
And by the way, that includes taping confessions. Okay. Interrogations, taping identification proceedings like lineups and show ups.
Okay.
Taping the entire encounter from front to back.
Okay.
And we have seen remarkable changes in behavior when it is understood why that has to be done, and it's done relentlessly, and you get punished when you turn it off when you're not supposed to, or when you fail to turn it on when you're supposed to turn it on. You see what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah.
Now everything flows from that. Everything.
Okay. Great. All right. So we're at our Q&A mark. Melissa, do we have any questions coming in?
Hi, good morning. Hi, Judge Murphy. Nice to meet you.
How are you, Melissa?
I'm good. I'm fully engaged in this conversation, and I'm honored to be here with you this morning. So we have a lot of questions, actually.
Okay.
So I'm going to do my best to sort of prioritize them. We'll start with this one from Christine. She says, the judge was speaking about a doctrine limiting the police from being sued. Is this doctrine in all 50 states? And can you just expound on that a little bit?
I don't know whether it's in all 50 states, because I haven't made that kind of scholarly inquiry, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's in 48, because it swept the country like wildfire. You know, this notion that the police have to be protected by keeping them from being liable is a false, you know, it's stupid, because that means they can get away with stuff that they shouldn't be doing.
Absolutely. We've got from Lorraine. She just made a comment that I think we should just put out in the air. She just said, judges and police swear on the Bible every day and they still lie. This has to stop.
Well, that's called human nature.
Unfortunately, right?
that's everybody everywhere.
That's
and
right.
By the way, one of my cross-examination techniques is based on thorough research of people's backgrounds. And I look for every form that they filled in, because I'm looking for lying. Right. And lying is so widespread throughout our culture. Yes. I'd say 85% of the people whose backgrounds I check thoroughly are habitual liars. And, you know, these are witnesses. These are people in the witness pool.
Yeah.
They're not the criminal pool.
Yeah.
You know, they lie to get credit. They lie to get jobs. They lie to get leases on property. They lie in bankruptcy proceedings. They lie to get insurance. You know, they lie to do everything.
Yeah.
It's endemic.
Yeah. Okay, so that leads me to from K-Run Denise asks, she says, what legal action would it take to institute this psychological testing that you're referencing, Judge Murphy, that really could be this preventative tactic?
Well, this is legislative form. We've got to create laws that mandate it. There's no reason not to do it. Now, what you're going to hear from the other side is, we don't need that. Yes, you do. Come on. Everybody knows you need it. Number two, it's going to discourage people from applying. No, it won't. It'll discourage crazy people and people who are unfit from applying. You know? So we need to do it. So that's the second leg of the stool. You know, now the third leg is how to use the data that you've accumulated about these officers to get rid of bad cops. Because any decent psychologist will tell you that it's easier to keep them from getting on the force than getting rid of them. You know, once a police officer's now an employee, you know, he has certain protections, and so you can't force him to be psychologically evaluated unless. And so we got to eliminate some of those unlesses so that we can use the tools of behavioral science to weed out the bad cops. That's the third leg of the stool. Get rid of the bad cops. And in city after city after city, rural area after rural area after rural area, you're stuck with a group of cops who's been doing it wrong ever since they got on the force and aren't going to change. What are you going to do with that?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Just like the cop you just mentioned about who was turning off his camera 27 times or whatever the number was, and then he's reinstated, you know?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what are the barriers to that then? What are the barriers to creating those laws and actually instituting that?
Well, we have a climate change that has occurred that has made it more likely that there are going to be sympathetic legislators looking at police reform legislation. Now, in some parts of the country where you have the red states, for example, you have far less sympathy because these are they Negroes. You know what I mean? They're supposed to be in charge of us. We're the ones who got away. We're the escapees. And so, you know, and they look at it as though we had a monkey for president when Obama was in office. You know, this has to stop. And this is the part of America where they're afraid that whites aren't going to be in control very much longer. And some of them are starting to freak out that this could be a permanent situation, that we have people of color and, God help us, women actually running the country.
Right.
And so you know, there's a fair amount of white male hysteria at work here. And so that complicates the reform efforts. But, you know, in the East, on the coasts, you know, in the big cities, police reform has legs, and it's going to happen, I think.
Yeah,
but you can't take the pressure off.
Okay.
Keep the pressure on. Okay. Do we have time for like maybe two more?
One more.
One more. Okay. Let's see here. We've got last one from Ruby. What concrete actions can the community take to affect real reform in policing?
Well, you can follow the fundamentals here. Proper screening psychologically, getting rid of bad cops, the mechanisms that the experts tell us can work. And there's several. Making sure that the police are recorded from front to back of any encounter that they have, whether it's at the police station, on the street, in the car, etc. Because then you know what's happening. You don't have the lying game going. You eliminate that. Investigative reform, you know, so the police can't abuse their powers by using certain techniques that ought to be outlawed, like putting a tracking device on your car without a warrant. And while we're at it, we ought to be looking at getting rid of these laws that cause the police not to be legally accountable for their bad behavior. That's a step backwards. And there the Supreme Court's been our worst enemy because they keep pushing that standard and making it more powerful as a way to avoid police accountability. So I think that's my top 5. Now there are all kinds of nuances that go along with that. How do you spend the money that's been over allocated for police responsibilities? Like all of these huge SWAT team financing and the automatic weapons, and some of that's got to go. And the police should not be the ones responsible for dealing with the mentally ill. They are to call in people who can deal with homeless folk, who can deal with alcoholics, who can deal with people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Professionalize that, because they still don't have that one right. If a crazy person, just to use the wrong vernacular, I'm sorry about that, folks, but I'm showing my age. If a person who is seriously mentally ill is encountered by the police, there ought to be a protocol. From the first crazy move the person makes, get on the radio, get a mental health professional on the scene. But we don't spend money for that, and some of the police money ought to be reallocated for that kind of thing. And follow-ups, witness investigation, witness protection. We got to beef that up, because criminals have a nasty habit of threatening witnesses as an effective tool to keep from being prosecuted.
Right.
So there are all kinds of things that go into this. Now, I'm going to add another one that's controversial. We ought to pay these police officers more money.
Okay.
The lower their pay, the more likely we're going to get retards and rejects. We're not going to get the quality unless we pay for the quality. And so we ought to professionalize policing by reflecting a pay scale that reflects how dangerous the work is, and how difficult the work is. And if we don't show the applicant pool that we're serious about getting high quality people, we're not going to get them. And so I think an essential element of police reform is higher pay.
And I would even add, Judge Murphy, just from my little old self, that they need to have longer training. Right about now, I believe the academies average about 6 months worth of training. And then they're put on the force. I mean, I would say they need to have at least 12 months of training and then a year probation to determine whether or not they are actually fit, to assess what their interactions have been like while they were in their 1 year probationary period. So by year 2 is when you really are looking at saying, okay, I think we can keep you.
Well, but you have a phenomenon called the fox policing the hen house. And if you don't design the system to prevent that from happening, all these kinds of things that you just said become words rather than behavioral change.
Right.
They become slogans rather than reality. So the carrot is higher pay.
Okay.
The carrot is higher pay. The unions want higher pay. Let's give it to them.
About the unions. Okay.
But only if you agree to this.
Yeah, with higher pay comes a higher responsibility, right? And a higher expectation.
Yeah.
I'm a student, a student for counseling and art therapy, and I will go through 2 years of training, and then I have to sit through 200 hours just to be able to sit with one individual at a time and talk about their mental health. So in contrast, he's going 6 months and no psychological training and none of that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we might want to create a curriculum aimed at training police the same way we train engineers and scientists and this, that, and the other.
Yes.
There's certainly a need. There is certainly a tremendous need.
Right. Okay, so we are about a minute over. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you.
All right. And Judge Murphy, I want to
Yeah.
thank you so much. You did this conversation in great service. I mean, this has been tremendous. And yet again, we could have gone on a whole nother hour. But I think you really gave us a lot to run with, because we're not just a talk show. We are really mining the information and data and looking at how to operationalize it and put it into action in the community, at least here in St. Louis. And I appreciate your insights and your perspectives, because we are going to move with this. Justice Beat listening audience, yet again, supporting us has been tremendous on Real STL News page, and we thank you for joining us. All of our supporters on the Facebook page, again, thank you for joining us today.
And thank you for your kind words. Thank you for your kind
Thank
words.
you. Thank you, sir. It's been my tremendous pleasure to have you on. And you hang around with us for a moment. We got a couple of things to take care of.
Be glad to do it.
Thank you for listening to the Justice Beat. If you like what you heard and found the information useful, then support the Justice Beat radio show by spreading the word and telling a friend.